I'm actually really excited about today because this particular topic, cost volume profit analysis, is a really neat one. It seems in many instances like it's a pretty straightforward thing, but so usable and so useful for anyone in a business, in an organization, running an event. There's a lot of ways to go about things. So what we're going to have a look at today, as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to follow the slides in a great amount of detail, just because the way they're structured, I do them slightly differently. But the key aspects, the key things that we'll go through in today is actually going to be what we need to go through. I'll also be getting you guys to be doing some thinking about this and actually doing some work on this. So it's not just me talking about how to do this. Now, so the objectives that we've got is to use a contribution margin to determine the impact of changes in sales and profit. We've been introduced earlier today as well as last week on contribution margin. We'll talk about it and we'll look at why it's important today. We'll look at what-if decisions using CVP analysis. Like, if you really get to the heart of it, that second objective is pretty much everything gets rolled into that second objective. If you think about determine impact of changes in sales, well, that's a what-if. Like, what happens if we do this? What happens to that? If you look at the break-even point, well, that's a what-if decision. What do we need to do to get break-even? What happens if we do this? How does that change break-even? So that affects it. Probably 3 and 4, where it's relevant for us, is moving from a single to a multi-product environment. So not everything sells single products. Lots do, but not everything. So we need to be able to expand beyond that to situations where we have multiple products. The 4th is what happens when we build in income tax. Because yes, we're after profitability, but if we actually want to know how much profit we're going to end up with, we've got to also take into account the fact that the tax man's going to come in and take 30%, maybe 25%, depending on how big your business is, take a certain cut of that before it comes to you. That is, unless you do some of the things we've seen some slightly less kosher accountants doing over the last week or two that's come out, where they've been doing some quite massive tax dodging. We're not sort of going to be talking about those situations. The last one is not one we're going to focus too much on. So the reason I'm excited, and this stems from last week, is I really want to make this happen. So we're going to actually look at it. We're going to get you guys to do some thinking about this. So as I mentioned, the Capitol Theatre, we can see the tram line just sort of wends its way down here and up to the Capitol Theatre up there. We're going to hold an accounting variety show. We're going to hold an accounting review down there. We're going to sell tickets. We're going to get people to come in. Now the really neat thing, and this is why I'm so excited, I've actually found some talent. I found some accounting talent that is willing for free, so that's good, that's a cost factor which we're going to have to take into account, for free to come down. And not only have I found it, I actually want to share some of it with you right now, because I think it just warrants a wider audience. So bear with me. So we've got some talent that's going to come down. Now, whether or not we're going to be able to get people to actually come to the show, that's a different thing, but we actually have someone to perform on the show. So this is probably going to be about one of the last slides I'll show up on here, and then we're going to go to Excel to sort of finish everything else off. And the reason I'm using Excel as opposed to a whiteboard, 1, some of the calculations work out easier, but 2, because I'm recording this, it means that this can be used afterwards. If I was to put it on whiteboard, it makes it a little bit difficult for anyone looking at it after the fact. So this relates to, you'll notice there's 5 things up there. It's not quite what we had earlier. Cost volume profit focuses on these things. Now there's one in there which I would add, and they've added one here which is important, but it's not as explicit in the expression we had earlier. So we've got prices of the product, we've got the volume of the product, so we've got price and quantity, we've seen that before. We've got the per unit variable cost, and we've got the total fixed cost. That's a cost structure, and we've seen that before. The thing which is not been included in this is profit as a variable. And I think that's an important variable to have, because sometimes we're actually looking to target a profit. Even if that's a 0 profit, we're looking to target a profit. But the one they've added in here, and it's it's important, and it wasn't explicitly in what I showed earlier, is the mix of products or services produced. With a single product environment, bless you, with a single product environment, it's just 100% of that product. And it makes the calculations easy. If we have 2 products being sold, it's actually not that difficult to do that. There's some assumptions that need to be made, but if you're comfortable with the assumption, the mechanics of it are actually fairly easy as well. So I'll just show what we had earlier, and then I'll write it up separately. So if we've got what we've got, profit is not explicitly in that list, but it's an important variable. But we've got price per unit, which is price of products or services. We've got quantity, we've got variable cost per unit, and we've got fixed cost. Assumed within this is that this is a one product company, or it's a one product event, or it's a one sort of ticket level event, or whatever it happens to be. That's what we're looking at here. All right. So I'm just going to write that up. So if we disentangle profit equals revenue minus cost, profit equals revenue minus variable cost minus fixed cost, profit equals price per unit times uni times quantity minus variable cost, variable cost per unit times quantity minus total fixed cost. All right, so that gets us down to what we need, that sort of final expression. Antonio, you just nudge him for a second? Can you just hit him for a second? Thank you. All right. So profit equals that. So once we've got that, there are 5 things in there. We're going to assume that the mix, we're going to deal with just one product at the moment. So we've got profit. The idea being, you get provided any 4 of those, you can work out the 5th. So let's actually use our accounting show as the basis for playing around with this. And so this isn't just where you have your accounting hats on. This is where, that's part of it, but it's actually thinking more broadly is, how does this work as a business? So what do we know about what we're doing? We need to sort of throw in some information. So I'm just going to make up some of this to begin with. So a ticket price. A price point is actually something that you need to come up with. We're going to have just one general admission ticket price. That's going to be $20. Now we can quibble later whether or not we think that price is too high or too low. Look, given the quality of the talent that we're seeing, I think that's a bargain for what you're going to get at the show, but people may feel free to disagree with that. So $20. The variable cost per unit, you buy a ticket to the show, that is going to get you a drink and some food, and there's some costs in sort of processing the tickets. So let's, we've worked out the cost structure, and it's looking like the variable cost per unit is $5 a ticket. So for every person that turns up, it's going to cost us $5 in terms of the, providing some refreshments, which comes with the ticket, and the actual ticket processing. The total fixed cost, the entertainers are doing it for free because, they are. And the venue hire, as we saw last week, is $11,500. So we've got 3 of the 5 things in there. Now, what I'm interested in, well, there's a couple of things I'm interested in, but I would like to hear from you. What do you think one of the key things, if you're going to set something like this up, whether it be an event, whether it be a new product, whether it be whatever, what is probably something which is quite important to know? Break even. You want to know at what point you don't lose money. That's a pretty critical one. If you find the point you can get to, you're never going to get to it, and you're never going to break even, well, there's no point doing what you're doing. So the break even point, which is a 0 profit. So break even is 0 profit. All right, so now we've got 4 things. We have profit, we want 0. Price per unit, 20. Variable cost of 5. Total fixed cost, 11,500. That leads to the only thing we don't know is quantity. That's what you guys have to work out for me right now. How many tickets do we need to sell for this show based on that information to break even? 7,627, does that sound about right? 767. Oh, yeah, 767, not 7627. 767. All right. So the break-even point, let's just write this down for the moment, 767 tickets. All right, cool. So let's walk through how we got that. So we just literally, for those that did it, you know how it's done. For those that didn't, we'll substitute some things in. So profit, we substitute with 0. Price per unit is 20. Quantity is what we're after. Minus variable cost of 5 times quantity minus total fixed costs of 11,500. So that 0 equals 15 times quantity minus 11,500. Quantity equals 11,500 divided by 15. Equals 11,500 divided by 15. Now, 766.6, you can't sell a portion of a unit. You have to sell a full ticket. And you've got to round up. You always have to round up, even if it's 0.1. You round up because if you round it down, you will make a small loss. So always round up. Round up 0. Whoop, there we go. All right. So 767. So what that means is we now have a market point. We need to sell 767 tickets at $20 a pop to come to an accounting show with no advertising, no marketing around it. Is that realistic? Maybe, maybe not. But at least we've got something to go with. Now then you would do that. So you look at that and you could start looking at, where, if you've been able to estimate the elasticity of demand, and you sort of look at demand and supply curves, where do you think people will go in terms of $20 for a ticket? Is that overpriced? Would you get 767? Do people are aware of it? What does that enable you to do? And you can start playing around with this. Like, what happens if we do this? What happens if we do that? And start changing things to see what scenarios unfold. The nice thing from this, and the initial point, which is good, what was the capacity of the venue, if you can remember back from last week? I'll be impressed if you can. That's a week ago. 2,000, that's good. Yeah, it was 2,000 people. So that means at break even, based on this input, this is well within capacity. So there's not a capacity issue here. We can definitely make money off this if more than 767 people turn up, which who knows. A couple of things to look at within this. So if you look at the contribution margin is price minus variable cost. So that's what the contribution margin is. What it's showing you is how much each ticket sale is contributing to paying off your fixed cost. Where it comes out, if you imagine drawing a box around these two, this is your contribution margin right here. So 20 times quantity minus 5 times quantity, that's your contribution margin. 15 times quantity, that would be your total contribution margin. 15 is your contribution margin per unit. So every ticket you sell is giving you $15 to paying off the venue, paying off whatever other fixed costs you've got. And then once you've paid off all of those, then it starts being profitable. So once you've cleared out, once you've done 767 tickets, every ticket after that is giving you $15. That's what that's saying. If you sell 867 tickets, you've made $1,500 profit. If you sell 967 tickets, you've made $3,000 profit, so on and so on and so on. So it's really important that you split out your variable and your fixed costs, because your price per unit has to be greater than your variable cost per unit. If it's not, it's actually better if you never sold a ticket, because you're actually losing money each ticket you sell. You're losing more money each ticket you sell. So your price per unit has to be greater, and that's knowing your cost structure, knowing what varies with what. Really important. So the nice thing is we can take this and we can start throwing, and we are going to do this, and I'm going to get you guys to do this. We start throwing in some what ifs. Like, well, what happens if we change something up? How does that affect where our break even is? So we've done this. This is an event. Think about what this is. We've done this event with hiring a venue, but with free talent and with no marketing budget, no advertising, completely word of mouth, which may not necessarily be the best way to do this. So let's say we were to spend $3,000 on an advertising campaign. You know, not the biggest of advertising campaigns, sure, but better than nothing. So what is our break even when we have $3,000 of advertising? Anyone figure it out? $967. So with $3,000 of advertising, we need to sell another 200 tickets just so that advertising pays for itself. So that advertising has got to be pretty good if it's it needs to get at least 200 extra people in. And we got that. It affected 3,000, 1450, 1450, 1450. $967. So we just changed the input, and you roll it down. Obviously, I'm not using Excel in the way it should be used, like this should all be automatic, but I'm just doing it so that you can see the steps as you flow through. So we need to sell 967 just to break even. So that advertising needs to do a pretty good job. It may do, it may not do. That's why we get advertising experts and whatnot to do this stuff for us. Hopefully it's effective. So when it rolls around to it, if we want to make our profit higher, if we want to do something, so we've got a baseline situation here now. If we want to improve our profit, what ways do we make that happen? Where's it shining off? That's not my watch. That's your watch. I was just seeing people sort of going, what's going on? So what ways, now I'm not talking about the actual how you operationally make it happen, but from a maths point of view, and we're going to, as we tweak these things, we're going to hold everything else constant, which is not realistic, and we'll explore the details that you need to worry about then. But if we were to change things, how do we make our profit higher? Yeah, we could just increase the quantity. So we increase this variable, we sell more, we're going to make more profit. Antonio? Yeah, we reduce variable costs. We increase the price per ticket. Or, there's one final one. Rashini, you got this. You know which one it is. Yeah, reduce fixed costs. So we've got 4 ways we can do it. Now, I'm not saying any one of those are easy, and I'm not saying any one of those in isolation won't affect other things, because they will. But those are the levers you have to pull. Now, some of them are going to be more effective than others. But if we think about price per unit, so who put prices up? We put prices up. What's likely to happen? Yeah, so if you put prices up, assuming there is some level of elasticity of demand, your quantity of people turning up is going to go down. So there's going to be a sweet spot, hopefully, within that, but that is going to change that. If you put variable cost per unit down, in this case, how would we decrease our variable cost per unit? So we're providing drinks, and we're providing refreshments as part of that, snacks and whatnot as part of the package. How do we change that? Well, there's a really easy way to do it. Yeah, don't provide them. You're getting $20 and you just get accounting music. That's it. You don't get a drink to go with it. You probably need more than one. You don't get any of that. So you can get your variable costs quite low. But that said, it's not as appealing to people in as much as it was appealing in the first place, because there's not the additional stuff that comes with it. So you may well see, variable cost goes down. You may well see an impact on quantity. That could happen. We don't know why people are buying these tickets. Total fixed cost. Our fixed costs, well, the two that are in there at the moment are the venue and advertising. So obviously we could go, well, let's not advertise. That'd save us $3,000. But then no one knows the show's on. So that's a bit of a problem. We could try to change our fixed costs with the venue. Now we could try to negotiate with the venue, try to do a deal. Now I don't know what bargaining power we've got, so that's probably not a great position for us to be in. We could just move venues. We could find a cheaper venue. That could be an easy way to do it. But what you're seeing is that once you've got this, you can start to see how decisions that you make then feed into what we're looking up here. So the last one, actually no, we'll come to profits, target profits in a second. But that's why this stuff is so handy. You can just start to play around with things. We've looked at contribution margin. We've looked at how you just start to throw in different numbers in there and see what takes place. Now, no, we'll do a profit one. I'm just going to change this up. If we want, should have thought of this beforehand. So if I wanted a target profit of $2,000, so let's change this. So I want a target profit of $2,000 here. Now the thing I don't know at this point is I don't know price. Like I've never done this before, and and I don't know how often it has been done, and there may well be good reason why it's never been done before. But we've got no knowledge of our price point. But we think based on market research, we think we should be able to sell. We think we should be able to sell 500 tickets. Why we're choosing a venue with 2,000 capacity, I don't know then, but let's just sort of go with that. So if we think we're gonna sell 500 tickets, and we really want that venue, what price should we charge? And this is a before tax profit. No, $33 a ticket. On the, like 33, perfect? Cool. All right, so let's see how we got $33 a ticket. So throw in the profit of 2,000 equals price per unit, which is unknown. So we'll do price times how many tickets? 500 minus variable cost of ticket of 5 times 500 minus 14,500. 2,000 equals price times 500 minus so what we end up with is price equals, what's that? 14,500. What's that? Oh, you're wrong or I'm wrong? I wouldn't have expected that. 2 plus 2,000 divided by 5. So it equals 14,500 plus 2,500 plus 2,000 divided by 5. That can't be right. No, 500. 500. Yeah. $38,000 a ticket. Three net. Yeah, that's a bit much. All right. Yeah, so what we can see is $38 a ticket. So if we only expected from a market point of view, we were only able to get 500 people to turn up, and that was our cost structure, and I wanted to make $2,000 before tax, I would need to have a ticket price at $38 a ticket. Now then you've got to, how much of that 500 was based on thinking ticket prices are going to be that high? To me, that looks like it could be quite high, but who knows? And you often see, the reason I'm using events is one, because there's something just down the road, but two, a lot of festivals in Australia, a lot of events in Australia have actually come under, have fallen apart. A lot of the reason because of this, they get their cost structure wrong, and then they sell tickets, they either have ticket prices too high and no one turns up, and then they've got all these costs they've got to pay for and they're stuffed, or they set their ticket prices too low, their cost structures, or they get people to turn up, but then they're just not making enough money to cover costs. It's important to get this stuff right. What's interesting though, and if you look at that last on row 6, what's interesting with this is, that looks kind of bad. Okay, what's interesting with this is how profit kind of almost looks the same as cost. It actually gets added into it. So, and in a sense, profit, your before tax profit, is kind of like a fixed cost. It's just not a fixed cost going to someone else. It's a fixed cost you're hoping that you're going to come out to you as an owner. So if we look at the 14,500 is the fixed cost component. We've then worked out the variable cost based on the units, and the 2,000 is what we want. That almost looks like it could just be added in like a fixed cost. It is almost acting the same way. So you spend money on advertising, that's just not profit that's going to go to you, but hopefully you'll sell more tickets. So it actually works quite similarly in that respect. Important to recognize though, that 2,000 is before tax. We will look at what happens when we have after tax profits as a target, because we need to just change something up slightly. That is with one ticket category. That's not super realistic. And yes, you do go to events where it's just a general admission ticket and it's just, you buy a ticket, everyone's the same price and you walk in. Yes, there are products out there like the fidget spinners or finger spinners or whatever the hell it's called, which is kind of just, somebody makes it, it's one product, that's all they sell. The ones that I got for my daughter were literally off a guy just standing, like not even at a kiosk, he was just standing in Westfield just selling them. Like that's all he was selling. So yes, you do see these things where they just sell one particular product. But that's not all the time. So what happens if we decide with this show, and we'll strip it back down to the initial starting point. So we want to break even. We have a $20 ticket. We have a quantity which is unknown, variable cost of 5, total fixed cost of, let's leave it at 14,500. No. So we've got this. What we're going to do is we're going to add in a second ticket class. So there's the standard ticket for $20 and it gets you a certain quantity of refreshments and whatnot. Or then you could get the premium ticket, which is obviously pricier, gets you better quality drinks, maybe sort of more of them, and gets you a signed, an opportunity to have a signed photo with the talent. So, obviously people will pay more for that. So what we have is the general ticket, and we've got premium ticket, and the price and the variable cost is 20 and 5. For the premium ticket, we're going to charge 30, and the variable cost, it actually doesn't cost that much to provide this additional stuff, so we'll say it's gone up by $3 to 8. So what we have is for each unit, for a general ticket, we've got a contribution margin of 15, which is what we've got existing already. What we have for the premium ticket is a contribution margin of 22. So for each premium ticket we sell, we'll make a contribution of 22. We need one more piece of information in there to be able to do anything with this, because the fixed costs are the same. The fixed costs are still 14,500. What we need to know is, or at least to estimate, is what proportion of tickets that we sell are going to be general tickets and what proportion of tickets that we sell are going to be premium tickets. Now we are making an estimate on this. But again, if you set all this stuff up in Excel or in a spreadsheet, it allows you to then tweak things. So what happens if it's 30%? What happens if it's 40%? So in this case, let's say for every 100 tickets, 70 are going to be general and 30 are going to be premium. I have no idea, I've just made that up. But you would like to do this with some level of kind of reasonable expectations about it. We don't just take a simple average. So a simple average would just be 15 plus 22 gives you 37. Half that, which would be $18.50. pretty sure it is. You don't just take a simple average of $18.50 because that would assume, I mean it may be, but that would assume that it's 50-50 the sales mix. What this is the sales mix. So if we got 70 and 30 as a sales mix, I'll write this stuff up. Get rid of this and this and this. So for product, for general ticket, we have, I'll put this over, general. We have price, variable cost. We have a price of 20, variable cost of 5. For the premium ticket, we've got 30 and we've got 8. So the contribution margin per unit is 15 and 22. The mix is 70%, 30%. You can use this with as many products as you want, as long as everything adds up to 100%. You then multiply the 15, the contribution margin per unit, by the mix percentage. Oops, bring that out. So we add them together and we end up with a weighted average contribution margin of $17.10. So for every 100 units, for every 1 unit sold, on average, it's going to give us a contribution margin of $17.10. We don't care which particular unit it is. Over a large enough number of them, they're going to be 70% general, 30% premium. We then take that number, and that is the contribution margin. And we treat it just like the contribution margin we had before. So we don't need to worry about price per unit or variable cost per unit. We take these together, and that's contribution margin. So I'll just take this down here. So profit, that line above is the same as contribution margin per unit times quantity minus total fixed cost. So profit of 0 equals $17.10 times quantity minus $14.50. Quantity equals $14,500 divided by $17.10. Equals this divided by that. So if we were going to introduce these premium tickets at $30 a ticket, the variable cost only goes up by $8, only goes up to $8. At a 70-30 sales mix, gives you a weighted average contribution margin of $17.10. Feed that all in, we need to sell 848 tickets in total. You then look at what the breakdown is within each. That's how many tickets you need to sell. There was a section in the slides, is what happens if the sales mix changes. Now, I'm going to ask you this without actually doing the numbers first, just not to calculate the number, which direction you think it's going to go. If the sales mix changes to 60-40, is our break even going to go up or down? Yeah. Our break even point is going to go down. If we shift from here to here, if more of these units being sold, we're selling more of the higher contribution margin units. If we're selling more of the higher contribution margin units, it means our weighted average contribution margin has increased. If our weighted average contribution margin has increased, it means for every sale we make, more is going against our fixed cost, which means we're paying that off quicker. So we can see that happen. So we had 848, keep that in mind, and we changed that to 60-40. Doesn't go down by much, but it goes from 848 to 815. So we have to sell slightly fewer tickets if our assumption changes. And that's a really good point to make. These are all assumptions. These are all estimates about what we think will happen. This isn't reality in the sense that it has happened. This is us coming up with different permutations of what could happen. And it's giving us something that we can then work with. I've never held an accounting review event. So I'm making this stuff up completely. There is no basis in fact, apart from the venue cost $11,500, there's no basis in any of this. I don't know if the market would respond. So if your assumptions are really bad, the decisions you make on the output is going to be really bad because it's not grounded in reality. But if you've got good historical data, if you've done enough sort of market research and analysis on it, you should be able to make reasonable decisions on these things. So that's adding in a second product. Now, before we jump off to the last thing we want to do, we're going to have a nice easy day today. Think about sales mix, and I want you to think about, we brought it up before, airlines. So if we want to fly, where do we want to go? Singapore, right, sweet. No, I don't want TripAdvisor. All right, Singapore. That's an invalid destination. What? Does it need to be wait till it's kind of, there we go. Find flights. There's a reason for this. Should have pre-baked it, but it's only a moment. Aha, perfect. So let's assume Thai, did they have any Airbus 3? Okay, no, that's got Royal. Let's just take the Airbus 350. So 289 economy. So it's 289 and 289 and 32. So 310-ish. So we can say roughly it's like 90%, 10%. There or thereabouts. So kind of 90%, 10%. Now, generally speaking, if you've got a price, the business class flights are generally 4 to 5 times higher than economy flights. It's not always that multiple, but that's a good indication. So if a price to go somewhere, Singapore, if we finally got to a ticket price, say it was 1,500, return, and 10%, the business class flight would be in the order of $5,000 to $6,000-ish. So let's say 5,000. We'll talk a little bit about airlines and variable costs and fixed costs. What are the fixed costs for a flight? Fuel. But that's not the fuel that's the fuel to account for your body weight and your baggage body weight. So, you know, if that's, when you're all said and done, 100, 120 kilos, maybe at most, plane's pretty heavy. So yes, it would be marginal, but it's not a huge impost on the total cost of fuel. So fuel would be a cost to them. You had fuel as well. Anything else? Taxes. Yeah, they might have airport taxes, which sort of, there's something, or like landing taxes, which they've got to pay per passenger based on that. There's one key one that I'm thinking of, and that's usually about, what's that? Salary of who? All right, okay, no, this is a good one. Have you seen that picture? There's a guy who caught a plane in Africa that literally he was the only person on the plane. Like literally he had the plane to himself. How many pilots did he have? Let's just say let's say we've got 2. Now if that plane had 100 people in it, how many pilots would there be? 2. So it's not really a variable cost because you still need pilots in the plane. They're still there. Regardless if you've got one person or a full plane, you still need the same number of pilots. Now the number of stewards on the airline will change slightly, but you still need a certain number of stewards for them. So that's then a range issue. That's a fixed cost, but based on range. But there is something that would be variable. Refreshments? What's that? Refreshments? Yeah, airline meals. How much do you reckon they cost the airline? I reckon if they cost the airline any more than about $10 per person for a 10-hour flight, I think they're doing well. So let's arguably say variable costs are 100. So the contribution margin, now there's a massive fixed cost. I'm not saying this is all rosy for them, because there is a huge fixed cost for airlines. 1,400, 10% here. Yeah, you get slightly, you get wine and slightly better things and whatnot, and food slightly better. But it's probably not going to cost them that much more to provide that than it is to provide that. So let's say it's double. Let's say it's triple. I think that's probably a bit much. The contribution margin, that ticket price in terms of the change in contribution margin. And again, I'm sort of, these are roughly right. These I have no idea about, and we know the mix is right. But the idea is probably in there that the contribution margin per unit for this is way higher. If you were to take the average, that's what, 470, 1400, that's what, 1260. That's 1617. So the weighted average contribution margin of a seat, assuming that they get relatively at capacity, or they sell 9 economy tickets for every 1 business ticket, is about $1,700 per person. Now they need to make that happen to pay off the fixed cost of running that flight. So you can imagine why they cancel flights if they're not full enough, because if they're not full enough, the variable costs are not going to contribute enough to paying off the fixed cost of having that plane run. So that's why they collapse flights down, so you're shunted on and you're aggregated with another flight. That happens in the US heaps. Australia, I mean, they do cancel flights, but in the US it's pretty, like it happens regularly where they will just cancel flights because they don't have enough people on them. So yeah, sales mix is important, and planes are a good one because they usually only have 2 or 3 classes. So you can kind of sort of look at it pretty easily. So the last one, so just Seat Guru is an amazingly handy website. Okay, the last thing I just wanted to have a look at quickly, and then we're done, is tax. Because when I wanted, not for this one, when I wanted my $2,000 profit, that was $2,000 before tax, but the tax office is going to take 30%, well, anywhere between 25 and 30% of that, because that's what's going to happen. But I can't fit it neatly into this. It's not a variable cost per unit because it's actually driven by profit, not driven by the amount of units that I sell. So what I have to do is actually work out, if I wanted a certain after-tax profit, I have to work out what the pre-tax profit equivalent is, and then I put that into the model. So to do it, let's, what are we doing here? Let's keep it with the sales mix that we've got. And I'm going to be after a profit after tax now of $2,000. So I'd like an after-tax profit of $2,000. There is one piece of information we don't have, but we need to be able to do this. Tax. Yeah, what the tax rate is. 30%. Yeah, so let's assume 30%. Obviously, the lower the tax rate, the more profit that comes through to you, that will change your break-even points, or your sales quantity points. But let's look at how many we need to sell to make an after-tax profit of $2,000 with a tax rate of 30%. I'll get rid of that. What that is, that $2,000, if it's after tax, is your proportion of that 100%. So if you imagine there's before tax profit, that's 100%. You keep 1%, and the tax office keeps 1%. The tax office keeps 30% in this case, and you keep 70%. So that means that $2,000 is 70% of whatever the total is. Yeah, that's what it is. So the after-tax profit, whatever you end up with, is the before-tax profit times 1 minus the tax rate. But what we know this, and we know the tax rate, and we know the after-tax profit. What we're trying to figure out is the before-tax profit. So we rearrange this. So we end up with before tax. We just shift it, we swap sides. Divided by 1 minus. So swap sides and then divide everything by 1 minus the tax rate. We end up with the after-tax profit we want is 2,000. 1 minus 30%, and we solve that out, and it should be 2,857. Yep. Either I've got amazing mental calculation abilities, or I've done this before. You pick which you think it is. 2,857. So that then gives us the before tax profit we need, and then once we've got that, we then just put that into the model and just solve it out as we've done previously. So with a sales mix, with a profit, a before tax profit we now know of 2,857, we end up with 14,500 plus the before tax profit of 2,857, all divided by $17.10. Round up, what am we rounding up? Is we need to take 2,857 because we're adding profit in, the before tax profit into it. And what we end up with, or what you should see, is a quantity of $976, so 976 units. We need to sell 976 units in a mix of 60-40 now, because that's fed in. So with a sales mix of general and premium tickets, with a profit, an after-tax profit of $22,000, we need to sell 976 tickets. So that's still less than half capacity. But that's a lot of tickets to come to an accounting show. So I'm still a little bit worried about the feasibility of it. But now we have information that we can move forward with, and we can talk to people and it's like, does it look like we're gonna make this happen? It's also why, and I think, did I talk to you guys last week that, if ticket sales aren't looking good for shows and good for tours, it's why artists will can shows. I'm pretty sure Pitbull was meant to come out a year or two ago, and ticket sales were not happening in the way that they would have liked, and they just didn't come out, or he didn't come out. Sucks for the few people that wanted to go see him, but not enough did, so they just cut their losses and move on. So look, that's pretty much what we've been looking at, and that's why this setup, and I'll just highlight it, that's why this stuff here is so important, because from this you can generate so much information to be able to make decisions on. And if you set this up well in Excel, you can have a variety of different sort of permutations of what happens if this happens, what happens if this happens, what happens if this happens, and just see like where things are going to fit. You can graph it out if you want to sort of see where things are going to lie. And it gives you a lot of background information. But again, it's only as good as the information you're feeding in. If you're making some really wild assumptions on things, you're going to get rubbish coming out the other end. So think about that. But on that note, that's what I wanted to talk about in relation to cost volume profit. I think it's a pretty cool thing, really handy. I've used it before. I will keep using it with different things, but definitely a useful way to go about stuff. That's all she wrote. I shall see you guys next Thursday for what will be, surprising, what will be our second last class.